Hi, hello, and welcome back to the HII Method. My name is Jen Hatz. I am the host of the HII Method podcast and also the founder of the HII Method, a holistic, integrative, and innovative approach to assessing and optimizing human health, well-being, and performance. And I'm partnered with Neuroforce One, a human performance company that has been training champions for years. And they offer training and assessments in their facility as well as remote options available. And today we are going to look at some of the top trends, some of the current trending trends, and also kind of forecasting a bit into the future. We're starting to, predict the future here based on these trends of really where to start, I guess, focusing our efforts towards, if you want to think of it like that, and where to maybe start really looking into and getting a little bit more excited and enthusiastic and encouraged into exploring these different spaces if they are new and unfamiliar, because this is really the trend. This is where things are going. This is where I'm forecasting this forward movement in these different spaces. And this is all specific to not just performance and recovery when it comes to those niches or those populations, but it's really, if anything, the big overarching umbrella of health and wellness and performance. So what I'm about to talk about with these trends and forecasting these trends into the future, it kind of sits within this middle ground between performance and health and wellness. And it's all based on how you're taking care of your body and also your mind, really. And so it's looking at more of a holistic model with how we approach these things. And really that little key word that I just gave there, that holistic side of things, is in fact probably the big trend that we see. And when I say trend, first of all, I don't mean like a trendy diet or something that has like maybe a more specific connotation behind it. When I say trend, I mean that this is it's gaining momentum as an idea, as a concept, as a method. And because of that, there's a lot more people that are first of all, becoming more enthusiastic and gaining more insight about these different things and the trends themselves, but then that starts to grow and it starts to expand. And before you know it, you have a much wider acceptance of maybe a methodology that would have started just as a trend at one point in time. So, all that being said, the top 3 trends that we're going to talk today, that I'm going to talk about specifically today, they all happen to start with the letter P. So I don't know if that is meaningful at all for anyone, but as I was mapping all this out, I'm like, man, this is like an alliteration right here. So the first one being Pilates. So get this, if you are not familiar with Pilates, I'm going to give you a little rundown of the history here. So Pilates it's a fitness methodology. It's a form of movement, and it's specific for not only healing and recovery, but also building up strength and stability. And so Pilates, right now, currently, we might think of it within kind of a certain niche or certain population or certain demographic. It tends to attract more health and wellness as a population, and it tends to attract more females than males. And it tends to have a little bit of we'll say like a biased perspective around what it is or who it's for or what it's good for or really anything about it. So to give you some background about Pilates, I'm like so jazzed to share this. So Joseph Pilates, he was the inventor, really, the initial creator of this entire methodology. So Joseph Pilates, he was a badass, to say the least. I don't know if I can say that on you. No, it's not a swear. So Joseph Pilates was a badass. Back in World War I, he was arrested and taken prisoner, basically with his whole group that he was working with. They were taken into an internment camp during World War I, where they were basically held captive. So essentially a prisoner of war being held in an internment camp. And while in this internment camp during the war and around all of these other prisoners, essentially, they're all just wasting away. There are soldiers that are injured soldiers that are bedridden, and everyone's just wasting away. And so what Joseph Pilates does with his entire background, really specific to physiology and kinesiology, he develops a fitness method for all of these prisoners of war to be able to heal and recover their bodies really from their beds, because some of these individuals, like I said, are like injured soldiers that are bedridden. So he took apart, first of all, the beds and started to reconfigure them into this structure so that the bed has basically these moving parts, using the springs of the bed and using like a flat part of the bed that actually moves, and then adding in different ropes and pulleys. And the entire contraption looks like this medieval torture device, but it's actually the complete opposite. It's actually a rehab and fitness device. And the like absolute genius that had to be there at play in this gentleman's mind at that point in time, to take something that was otherwise a dire circumstance for all of these individuals and to flip it around and to say, we're going to make use with what we have, and we're going to create something that is going to help us to get better. And that's what happened. So all of these soldiers that were having to rehab from injuries, and all of these other prisoners of war that were otherwise wasting away, they started implementing this Pilates method for fitness and for recovery, and changed their health and their state of health. So then when different diseases were coming through the camp, they weren't getting wiped out and succumbing to illnesses. They were actually more resilient because their health had improved, because they had this ability to, like I said, to make the best with what they had. And it ends up being this genius idea. So total badass of a person, right? Joseph Pilates. But so now that entire methodology of Pilates training, if you want to think of it now, that really it was designed, first of all, for men. This was all men that were, there present. So it was designed for men and for recovery and healing work, as well as basic strength training, stability, anything that is going to help stimulate neuromuscular development when you otherwise wouldn't have those other forms of resistance training, or really any other tools or methods that you would have access to. So this, I think, is the key part of why Pilates as a methodology is starting to make its way a little more mainstream, and starting to like bleed into other demographics where it would have otherwise been viewed, like I said, with a whole lot of more specific female populations, a lot of dancers, a lot of more, long lengthening types of movement and sport type of mechanics, you could say, that would be attracted to it. But now it's starting to make its way into really across the performance space, and across, males and females alike, across all ages and across all abilities, because it's helping to strengthen and really stimulate neuromuscular development regardless of your otherwise large scale training methods, your strength, anything else that you could otherwise be doing, really is kind of taken out of the equation. And you're put in this situation where you have the support of the device itself that is helping, and you're the one who is in control of everything, but the support of the device itself is helping you. So it's kind of this really interesting like dynamic. So yeah, I could go on and on about Pilates, but yeah, so that device that I was talking about, this bed that was rigged up, basically, it's now called a reformer. So if you ever look at different Pilates practices or classes, the reformer Pilates is the one that is using that contraption that I explained, that it's, like I said, it looks like a medieval torture device, but it's actually the complete opposite. So if you want to think of like just to give that in even more illustration, so like a medieval torture device, if you imagine that you would like lay down in something and it's pulling you apart or something like that, instead you are using this device, you're using this reformer, but it's completely anchored, and you are the one who is moving the different parts. So it's an emphasis on your sense of control. And that's actually the initial label, or the initial name for this fitness methodology that Pilates coined, was controlology, because it's a concept about you being the one in control of not only moving your body, but moving these different parts of this device with your body. And so it's a much slower, much more steady type of a movement pattern. And the resistance that you feel, and really the neuromuscular stimulation that you experience, is different from anything else that you would experience. So I think this is another thing why it sets it apart from anything else that is out there right now in the fitness space. Because if you were going through, let's say, yoga for recovery work, or like just basic stretching and rehab procedures, if you're going through like physical therapy, there are pros and cons to different methods, using different bands, for instance. Or even if you're strength training, you're using different tools or implements, like you're adding we could say adding chains to the barbell or something, like all these different techniques and tools and implements that can apply a different stimulus in a different way or a different point within a movement pattern. And so what Pilates is doing, what the reformer Pilates is doing, especially with these springs, is that you're allowing yourself to experience that much more of a different type of stimulus. So cannot say enough about this practice. And you're going to hear a whole lot more about this because this is actually going to be something that I'm going to incorporate into some research trials where taking different, populations, and based on different lengths of time, whether it's 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, however many times per week, if, 1 day a week versus 2 days a week, and really trying to map out a big picture protocol of what this could look like as a rehab program for injuries or as an actual, like in-season recovery type of practice. So for instance, your recovery days while you're in season, maybe this is something that could actually benefit those days in season versus if it's something that is more of a benefit in off season, so trying to really piece together the details of when and where and in what ways this is beneficial so that we can then have that overarching protocol that everyone can start to fall in line. And before you know it, you're going to start having Pilates instructors and Pilates reformers as like integrated into different performance facilities. So that's the first trend to keep an eye out for is Pilates. The second trend to keep an eye out for, again, these all start with the letter P, ironically enough, is plant-based diets. And this is a topic that I love that there's already a lot of controversy around this topic, especially because there's so much information out there, so much perspective and personal bias out there that if anything, the water gets a little muddy when it comes to trying to navigate if you want to say, quote unquote, the best possible way to eat in order to promote your health and really in order to have a more sustainable and more overall healthful approach to how you eat and how we eat and the decisions we make with the foods that we are prioritizing. Because we do have this very real contrast, especially right now, with how we view what is healthy for us in our individual bodies versus how we view what is healthy for our overall ecosystem and for really the sake of us continuing to follow with certain lifestyles or certain priorities with where we are placing time and energy and effort and space and anything that may be if for instance, if the way that we're eating right now being if there's like a high amount of animal proteins in our foods across our diet, where and in what ways could that be impacting not only our personal health but then also environmental health, our overall I was going to say the economics. So really it is also economics. Like it's not just environmental. There is also a very large economic pull here, lever being pulled within this whole decision making of why it is that we're eating meat versus other foods. And so there's a whole lot of layers of context and potential controversy behind this contrast of if we should have a lot of animal-based proteins versus having plant-based proteins. But what I can say right now is that having a plant-based diet is different from that argument of animal protein versus plant protein, because a plant-based diet just means, in the most literal sense, it means that the majority of your diet is based in plant foods. So as soon as you flip that switch in your mind about, okay, I can eat a plant-based diet and still have some animal protein foods within my diet, but the majority of my diet is all these plant-based foods. And if that is enough of a trigger for you to then follow through on that overall approach, then you're in that much better position for your overall health and for the health of the planet, for the health of our economic decision making with where we want to place our dollar when we're going through the grocery store. Like everything, all the downstream effects that we could possibly have end up kind of becoming more magnified and more expansive because of that just slight change that maybe instead of having this, instead of having like, let's say like a full palm size of meat on my plate, maybe I want to cut that back and instead have some plant-based protein with it, but fill out the rest of the plate with plants. And I'm telling you, like the most monumental change that you can make, and yet it's so simple. So I'm actually going to be pumping out a whole lot of content across episodes and blog posts related to this concept of a plant-based diet and really how to best optimize what is it you're taking in for the sake of all of those different variables. But if there's one thing to keep in mind, it's just the fact that that plant-based diet is not by any means a 100% vegan diet. And so it doesn't fit into that category of those arguments and the controversy around those arguments. It's really just prioritizing primarily plant-based foods across your diet because that is going to be the most beneficial for your health and for the health of the planet. Now, the third trend to keep an eye out for, going along with what I just said about plant-based diets, the third trend is actually the use of plants and different herbal therapies. And herbal therapies across different needs that we may have that in some ways could be seen as medicinal and in other ways could be seen as, I don't want to say recreational, but more that it's more to help us with an overall sense of well-being or sense of balance in our lifestyle. So there's kind of this, if you want to think of it like a spectrum of where and in what ways we would utilize certain substances. And so that could span from, using medications for medicinal purposes, but now there might be higher emphasis on certain plants or herbal remedies, different herbal therapies to take the place of traditional medicines used. I say traditional medicines, really it's more the conventional medicines. It's more the modern day medicines that you would be replacing with more of the herbal therapies and herbal remedies. And so that could be like one end of the spectrum where it's more medicinal uses. And then the other end of the spectrum, like I said, could be more seen as more recreational use or more as woven into your lifestyle, maybe to help with, in some cases, maybe it's something that you want to enhance concentration and focus. And in other ways, maybe it's that you want to have greater sense of, we'll say maybe a decrease in stimulation. You want to feel more relaxed. You want to experience deeper sleep at night. So there's all of these different uses and potential areas that can be addressed that right now there are, I'm sure, like probably every potential medical intervention that you can imagine across these different spaces, but then there's also equally just as many, if not far more, different herbal and we'll say plant-based and herbal remedies. And there's a large push that I can see happening for the foreseeable future, really, in trying to really navigate when and where a more modern day medicine would be the absolute, yes, we have to utilize this medicine right now. This is a life-saving thing, in whatever sense that is what is best. Versus what are the other situations where we don't need to go that route and we can use something else, something that maybe has a longer, we'll say a longer tradition culturally behind it. And this is probably, I think, the most interesting thing because that's really the big picture, we'll say the big picture argument here is the fact that there are centuries of cultural traditions that utilize different plants and herbs. And yet it's only within this last century, really like the last century or the last half century, when we've become so specifically hyper-focused on certain avenues to help optimize our health and then discrediting others, really because of wherever those different, we'll say different techniques or methods are found within research. And so what we have to do is start peeling back some of the layers of potential bias, first of all, and start to expand our views of really these centuries old practices using different herbs and plants and across different cultures, really exploring that and finding in what ways we can utilize that modern day. So that's the third trend. So as you can see, all three of them start with letter P. Oh my God, and that just rhymed. Look at that. So we got Pilates, we got plant-based diets, and the use of plants and herbal remedies. So all three of these, start just looking into them. And I'm going to start putting out that much more content about these three areas because as you can see from everything I just explained, they are so interesting in themselves, but they are very clearly going to be the front runners of the ongoing trends for the foreseeable future. So drop a comment if you found that helpful and informative in any ways, and if you're interested to learn any more. All right, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.